Hello and welcome to this short webinar which is part of our toolkit on fundraising from grant makers. This webinar is going to assume that you have been working through the fundraising from grant makers toolkit and that you have worked through the first stages needed to apply for funding. So this webinar is going to cover applying for funding, developing a project. We're going to list some do's and don'ts when applying for funding, and then there's some useful things you can do to take away. So it's really important when you are submitting a funding bid that you remember that the person that's going to be reading that funding bid is an actual human being, and it's really good if you can keep them interested. We asked a panel of funders to an event that we had recently, and we asked them what kind of application lights them up when it lands on their desk. And actually, some of the key answers that they said were, once I've read it, I know exactly what the organisation does, I understand exactly the issue they want to tackle, I understand how they intend to tackle it, I understand the change they want to bring about, and I understand how much it will cost. So bear those 5 key things in mind before you start writing your bid so that you can make sure that you're addressing each one of them. Unless a grant maker or funder specifically states that it will fund what we call core costs or running costs, or make a general contribution, you will need to develop a project for your bid rather than just asking for a donation. This can be anything that your group wants to do or it needs, but it does need to be wrapped up as a project with some clear outcomes. If you're unsure about what outcomes are, there's another webinar as part of this toolkit that you'll come to a little bit further down the line. Now, most funders like their grants to pay for most of the project rather than contributing to a larger piece of work, unless they state otherwise. So bear that in mind when you're looking at how much a project costs and whether it's the right funder to apply for. Any project that you're developing should assist your organisation in achieving its overarching aims, but it should be able to produce its own set of activities and outcomes. So it should be a clearly defined piece of work. So it's really important before you even really decide which funder you're going for that you've got a clear project plan, so you know that when you find a funder, you will be clear about what you're asking for. So before you start actually putting pen to paper on the application, try and produce a clear written description of your project or need. So why is the project important? What exactly will you do and how will you do it? What will the outcomes be? How will you demonstrate that you've achieved those outcomes? How much will your project cost? And what will happen after the funding runs out? So actually, it's really important that you show an understanding of building in some kind of sustainability to that project if it's needed, that you recognise that you might have to look for funding elsewhere, or that actually you could start charging for it, or the members of the group that are using that project fundraise themselves for it. Just show that you have an understanding that actually there is going to be life after this project. So super important, you have decided what your project is and what it's going to do and how it's going to help people, but actually what funders want to know is why you think there's a need for this project. Just saying that you know there is isn't enough, even if that is the case, but actually how do you know it? So if your users or your group members are telling you that there's a need, make sure you write that down. Actually, you can submit that as evidence that community consultation is telling you that it's needed. So think about what evidence you can offer aside from that. Is there somewhere that you can get some statistics or a piece of research that backs up that what you're offering is needed? You also need to look at how you know that your proposed project is actually going to meet the need that you've said there's evidence for. So actually, has someone else done it in a different area? Have you done it before? How do you know that what you're proposing will actually meet that need? And if you're not using community consultations, how will you show that you have included the people that are going to be benefiting from the work that you are going to be doing? It's important that they have a say in the design of things because they're the ones that have the need and they know how that should be addressed. So any research or data or statistics is great, but remember that human stories are better. Funders are confronted with applications full of statistics every day. They don't want to sit there reading pages and pages of pie charts and graphs. Actually, it's important to put some robust data in there, but it is really important to make sure you are telling the human story of how people benefit from your work. If you go back to the toolkit, you'll actually see some different tips on where you can source different bits of evidence from. That's going to be a useful list for you. So now we're going to just share a simple do list. So the first thing on my do list is read the guidelines. Actually, so many groups that apply for funding don't read the guidelines, and it's a waste of your time. You need to read the guidelines to ensure that you are supplying the right information, that you are applying for the right type of project, that you're eligible in the first place. So don't waste your time or the funders. Read the guidelines thoroughly. Do learn more about a funder before applying. Who have they funded before? What are their interests? It's really important to spend just a little bit of time just finding a bit more out about them. And once you have, you can tailor your application to fit that funder. So don't just copy and paste the same application to every funder. They all want different things in different ways. So you've got to invest a bit of time in tailoring each application. Really important to ensure that you're clear about all the terms and conditions of any grant. So actually, if a grant maker says, yes, we want to fund you, and you say, great, we'll take your money, is there anything else that you need to be aware of? Sometimes you can have a grant for £500, but actually the reporting is so intense that you have to wonder whether the £500 actually outweighs the capacity you need to report back on that grant. So make sure that you're happy with all the terms and conditions. Seek help if you need it. Actually ring the funders, ask them about eligibility. If you've got questions, you can ask them. You can always seek support from us at Consortium as well. That's kind of what we're here for. Once you've written your application, super good idea to get someone outside of your group to read it. If they can tell it back to you in different words, or if they can clearly explain what you want to do, then you're doing something right. If they look very confused, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board, just see about how you can be clearer about what you're doing and how. Definitely keep a copy of your application and anything else that you've sent in. You'll also need to probably supply that to any references that you supply, because they'll want to know what they're offering references on behalf of. But some funders will also give you a ring and they'll want to chat through your funding bid, so it's useful to have it on hand. Learn from unsuccessful applications. So it's absolutely fine to ask for feedback. Not okay to be rude to a funder because they've turned you down, but absolutely okay to really push for some feedback. If we don't know what we're doing wrong, we can't get better. And to really learn from those unsuccessful applications. Make the adjustments that the feedback suggests, whether you like them or not, and just really kind of try and improve every time. It might be a simple thing that you didn't read the guidance properly and you weren't eligible because your income was a different amount. So it's definitely worth finding out why. And keep it human. Remember that those funding officers are all human beings and they want to have their interest piqued and they want to know about what you do and why you do it. So keep it human. And here's my don't list. So don't send a load of stuff that you're not asked for. Actually, funders are inundated with funding bids and they want you to send the things that they have asked for, not a load of supplementary stuff. So again, read the guidance, see what you're being asked for and send exactly what you're being asked for. Don't forget that processing an application takes time. So when you are planning work, you need to build in the time that it will take for a decision to be made and for you to actually receive that money. So bear that in mind. If you are trying to plug a shortfall in income or anything like that, it probably isn't going to be very successful. A fundraising plan can really, really help with this. So we have a toolkit on that. If you are interested in your group kind of creating a 12-month or 2-year fundraising plan, that can really help with kind of timelines. Don't be greedy. Just because there's a maximum, it doesn't mean that you've got to go for it every time. Be realistic, so don't shortchange your organisation, but actually ask for what you need rather than the maximum amount. And don't just apply for everything. It's a waste of your time. Look at who groups have look at who funders have funded, look at what their interests are, and spend your time on the funders that you have the most chance with. So here's a really simple list of things that you can go away with and start making kind of like a habit for your group. And a lot of these are covered in our toolkits, probably the one you're working on now. So really nifty to have a description of your group's aims, vision, mission, work, etc. So they're ready to use in funding bids. And those are the kind of things that you can copy and paste across because those things aren't going to change. they are going to be the same for your group, regardless of who you're applying for. As a group, you can create a simple fundraising plan that looks ahead at what you might apply for. Again, that can really help with taking the stress off timelines. Start keeping a file of supporting evidence, although it's entirely up to you of what you call it. They can be comments from service users, feedback, they can be statistics, reports and data that you've come across. Keep them all there, and then when you get to the next funding bid, you could think, aha, I'll just look in that file, there'll be something I can use in there. And really important to be familiar with all your group's costs. So that actually, if there is a quick application, you don't have to be waiting for 10 years for the treasurer to come back to you and let you know how much this costs. You'll also be able to see at a glance as to whether it would be a good amount of funding for you to cover something. So if you need any further support around writing funding bids after you've done this toolkit, which this webinar is part of, just get in touch with the engagement team. We've actually got an engagement officer who specifically works with groups around writing funding bids on the email address that you can see on the screen. Other webinars in this toolkit include measuring and demonstrating change, in which we explore outcomes, activities and outputs. So you can watch that later on in the toolkit and get a bit more familiar with that.